Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Accessible Streets Studio Virtual Showcase. I'm Shana Horowitz. I'm the Vice President of Product and Programs at New Lab. And my team and I are really excited to have the opportunity to share the work of the studio with you today. You're going to be hearing from the people who have been working diligently over the last year to launch this program, as well as our first cohort of startups who have been bringing their products to life in Detroit in collaboration with local leaders and communities over the last 6 months. Here's a quick preview of how we're going to use the next 2 hours together. First, I'll share more context on the Accessible Streets Studio and how we got here. Then we'll segue into a fireside chat with our partners from Michigan Central and from Projects and People. Then you're going to have the opportunity to hear from all 7 startups in the cohort over the course of 3 panel discussions. So the discussions will hone in on different themes that the studio has focused on and really take a look at how each startup is applying transformative technology to address their theme in a unique way for and really with Detroiters. So here at New Lab, we apply transformative technology to help solve pressing challenges. We power entrepreneurs, engineers, scientists, and inventors. And through studios like Accessible Streets, we pair entrepreneurs with public and private sector leaders to collaborate in service of addressing urgent and complex challenges. At New Lab, we foster community between entrepreneurs and experts, and we design programming like our innovation studios. And we also deploy capital into companies that we really believe in. And we do all of this in service of leveraging technologies and advances that are happening in robotics, AI, connected systems, and material science in order to support cities working towards equity, improve health for the benefit of humanity, innovate in infrastructure to bolster resilience, and advance sustainability to protect our planet. So New Lab and Michigan Central launched a partnership in 2020 to foster a community of startups, researchers, investors, and entrepreneurs committed to helping shape the future of transportation in a way that benefits everyone, and to bring that vision to life with Detroit at the center. In that spirit, our work in the studio has really focused on the immediate transportation challenges facing the neighborhoods around Michigan Central Station, and using those challenges as a call to action for startups to join us in piloting new services and products with the community. To learn about the mobility challenges and opportunities facing neighborhoods in Detroit, we spent a lot of time listening to the community and engaging with local leaders. And through a series of workshops and a diary study where a dozen Detroiters virtually brought us along as they navigated daily life, 4 different focus areas emerged. And these focus areas became the guiding principles that we invited startups from around the world to join us to pilot their project or services in collaboration with neighborhoods around these 4 guiding principles or themes. And these themes include creating an easier first and last mile for people's journeys, fostering welcoming and safe streets that serve pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users, not just cars, providing better access to timely and accurate mobility information, and lastly, using mobility to improve access to essential resources, whether it's fresh food, healthcare, school, or even employment opportunities. So you're going to be hearing about these themes throughout the afternoon and how each of these 7 companies offers a novel vision for addressing these different pain points. But next, I am going to ask you to please join me in welcoming Roshni Shokar from Michigan Central and James Fegan from Projects and People into a fireside chat.
Hey everyone. Hey Shana.
Hey Roshni. It's lovely to see you. All right. So Roshni, I'd like to get started with you. For folks that might not be aware, can you share a bit about Michigan Central's vision and how New Lab and this partnership, and specifically the Accessible Streets Studio that we're discussing today, fits into that big picture?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who are not familiar with Michigan Central is a mobility innovation district that Ford is building in Corktown, which is the oldest neighborhood in Detroit. And so Ford is restoring the historic Michigan Central Station and the book depository building as the anchors of this district, but that is just a small part of what the whole vision is. This is not just going to be a Ford campus or a Ford property. We're really envisioning this being a place where innovators, startups, policymakers, big corporations come together to innovate in the mobility sector. So we know that a lot of these challenges in the mobility space are not going to be solved by one company or one person alone. They're going to take collaboration, and that's really what we're envisioning creating in this space. The Accessible Street Studio and our partnership with New Lab is one of our first, efforts in that area of bringing all these different stakeholders together to, tackle some of the challenges that the neighborhoods around the Michigan Central Station specifically were facing. And so this is just a taste of what's to come. But so hearing from some of these companies today will give you kind of an idea of what you can start to see and envision around the Michigan Central Station in the district.
Great. Thanks, Roshni. James, you've been an integral member of our studio team, really helping the startups in the studio to navigate Detroit as they bring their projects to life. Can you tell us about your mission with Projects and People? What's behind it, and how did that play into the kind of work that you were doing as part of the studio team?
So, our broad goal at Projects and People, first of all, thanks for having me. It's been exciting to work with you. Our broad goal is to serve as a platform for economic mobility and to help create those platforms. And those platforms that come to life in physical buildings or programming or investment strategies, or just connections and opportunities and relationships. And so, with New Lab, we really got to lean into that ladder of understanding, as a lot of us do, that mobility is an integral part of our future. It's also an integral part of our day-to-day life, even though we may not call it mobility. Horses were mobility, walking paths are mobility, as well as autonomous vehicles and robots that bring you lattes and Thai food. And so being able to really break that conversation down and help everyone understand that they are a part of the mobility conversation, and they are not just recipients, but active participants and creators and users and folks that have agency in that conversation has been really exciting for us, both with this project and some of the ways that we think it can connect and extend as this work goes forward.
Awesome. Maybe sticking a little bit with that theme, James, it's maybe an understatement to say it's not easy to bring new technology to cities, especially when it disrupts the way things have been done, or maybe it's just entirely new. There are no rules and regulations for doing this. You're introducing something to people for the first time. What approaches have you seen be most successful in helping companies to land in Detroit and to bridge that gap between, this audacious vision that they might have, something that they might have tested in a lab environment, and then actually bringing that, so to speak, to the streets, to the sidewalks, to the public realm, and starting to engage with actual, people and users?
Well, I think the two things are, as a theme, you have to start with trust and value. And so we're able to come in and leverage, some of the trust that we've built, to help start the conversations. But then it really boiled down to, sometimes we put like business development and go-to-market strategy over here, and we put community engagement over here. And it's really the same conversation. It's, how does this thing that you're building make my life better? That's the fundamental conversation you have with a potential customer when you're doing focus groups and figuring out your target market. That should be the same conversation you're having with the community, not a secondary benefit conversation, or how do I create enough palatability for me to go do this thing, but how does this thing make your life better? How does it address a problem that you have today, or at least give you a roadmap to a future that gets you excited about continuing the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Roshni, that's maybe a good segue back to you. Can you share more about how Michigan Central has plans to keep the community first and front and center as this innovation starts to come online at the district? And really, how does Michigan Central see the opportunity to innovate with local needs front and center, and to really work collaboratively with neighborhoods?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our key pillars at Michigan Central is improving equity and access for all. And so this is really at the forefront of, a lot of what we're doing with this development. We have a few people on our team who their role is dedicated to engaging the community, showing up at regular community meetings, figuring out what we can do to help bolster the businesses in Southwest Detroit as we're bringing this big development here. So it's really important for us to be bringing the community along in the process. Shayna, you spoke a lot to some of the things that we've done in this studio to make sure it was meeting the community needs. And I think that method of, research before launching pilots in a neighborhood is really important. And so I think that's really going to provide a framework for, everything we do moving forward in this neighborhood. I think this district can only really thrive if we bring up the neighborhood that it's built in. And so we would love to continue finding the needs in the neighborhood and connecting these new technologies that we're bringing here to kind of help serve those needs. So it's going to be a blueprint for everything we do.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, the three of us have had a lot of conversations over the last year. Of course, we're not running this studio in a vacuum. We've all been dealing with the changing landscape of COVID and all the challenges that has brought, particularly as it pertains to just bringing people together and making sure that people feel safe and comfortable doing so. James, I want to invite you to talk a little bit. This last weekend we were together toasting at Batch Brewing and had all the startups there, and it felt like a great opportunity to finally just sometimes it's just as simple as bringing people together and starting a conversation and breaking bread. I know Detroit Harvest Fest was another kind of highlight from the fall. We had Sam from your team out there with the KiwiBot team and just engaging people, hearing what they think, just starting conversations. But could you speak about kind of what those moments have meant and kind of how they ladder up to this bigger vision in your experience, James?
Yeah, and before I answer that question, thank you for mentioning Samantha Hall. She's been a rock star with our team, front and center, out with folks. So it's been great to have her. She's been an integral part of this work. I think it really comes down to, when we started talking, obviously there's, Ford and Michigan Central, there's the city, there's New Lab, and then there's the Venn diagram of all our relationships and all the projects that we're doing. And, we spent a lot of time, understandably thinking through how to orientate folks to that, structure. But when we could really boil it down again to not even explaining the name of the startup and what the technology was and how it was developed, but what are the challenges you're facing today? And would this be helpful? So, for example, with Lazarillo, understanding on one side, if you're someone who's visually impaired, this could help you navigate spaces and restaurants and small businesses. If you're a small business, this could make your business more accessible, both from just equity and good thing to do standpoint, but also I think we lose that's a business opportunity. If more folks, either individually or as part of groups, can access your goods or services, they're more likely to use your goods or services. So really just boiling things down again into those basic value propositions. Once you start doing that at scale and doing that consistently, gives you the chance to raise up into some of these larger conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask a question actually to both of you. Roshni, maybe we can start with your answer. For any companies that might be in the audience today who are thinking about wanting to grow their presence in Detroit, what advice would you have for them in terms of, how to show up and how to put their best foot forward? And maybe Roshni, from your perspective, it's what you hope Michigan Central can bring to that equation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the first and most important thing is to like actually show up and come here and talk to people, hear about their challenges, and hear about, actually think about how your solution can help contribute to their day-to-day and what they're facing. I think that's really important. Detroit has a very, unique community feel. It's like a smaller city, but also a big city. So I think we have a really unique dynamic here that it's important to see before you just bring a technology here. So I think that's my biggest advice.
Absolutely. James, anything to add there?
I mean, she answers the question really well. I think I would just say, again, it's a mix, and it almost sounds like a contradiction of, you can't necessarily say, oh, I tried this thing in New York and now I'm going to bring it here, but also don't lose sight of that fundamental need to add value. And don't be afraid to engage, and to have conversations and treat the community like customers and like users, and have that same hustle to really solve problems and listen and take in feedback and iterate, and think of them not as a secondary market, but as your potential primary customer base.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Any last anecdotes you're keen to share, questions I haven't asked you that you want to leave the audience with today as they get ready to listen to kind of the individual stories of these 7 startups and their journeys over the last 6 months? No pressure.
I think the 2 things I say is, number one, first of all, to all of the startups, it's been a pleasure to serve you. I know that, there might have been moments where we learned a bit along the way, but I hope you can feel that the last couple of months of your life, or several months, were worth your time, and that you learned something here, and that you are on your way to something that you believe really helps your company grow. And I think that, for us, the opportunity continues to really think about, whether it's one startup or the collection of startups or some of the larger products here. I think that Detroit, obviously we have a mobility history that needs no explanation, but I think our mobility future can be just as bright. And there's some one-of-one things happening here that we can collectively really start to elevate and build some mass around, and I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Great. All right, we did get one question from the audience. So Roshni, maybe I'll preempt this for you as you also think about just anything you want to leave the audience with. So the question is, are the models that are being tested and developed in Detroit in this studio, do you feel that they're applicable to other cities? Maybe another way of looking at that is, do you see that the differences that are unique to Detroit make the things that happen there applicable elsewhere, or how do you see that sort of connectivity?
Yeah, I think what we've done in this studio is definitely applicable to other cities. I think, what has really been important is innovating in a human-centric manner with the community first and forefront. I think that's something that you can bring to many other cities and many other neighborhoods. The exact path of doing so might be different. But I think at a high level, you still need to engage the city, the community, find the right solutions. There's a lot of the steps are very similar. So I think what we're doing here is kind of creating a playbook for how to innovate with the community at the center.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I just wanted to say thank you to all the companies for being a part of this. It's been really fun to kind of do this with you all. So we're really looking forward to seeing these pilots launch.
Thank you. James, did you want to get the final word in there?
Yeah, I would just say I think that Detroit presents a unique opportunity for folks that are piloting things, because we have in pockets, we've got some urban density. We've also got some areas of opportunity that almost mimic more of a rural environment, which I think is left out of these conversations in the first wave. And then you've also got some suburban communities that are either, that feel is available within the city, and also 10 minutes away from the city's core. So if you just think about a product you're piloting to be able to deploy it in 3 different types of environments within a 10-mile radius, that's a unique opportunity to really learn a lot that can accelerate your startup and the questions you're trying to answer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point. And I think, all of our experience in the last year has certainly sent the message loud and clear that Detroit and more broadly Michigan wants to do this kind of work and is at the table to hear from innovators, whether it's homegrown innovators, people who have been doing this for decades in the area, or people who believe that what they're building could be applicable. And that to New Lab, that's the best place to start from, because the will and the intention is there, and then starting to offer some of these frameworks and these opportunities to really have those conversations. And I watched really the conversation change with some local businesses who were getting introduced to KiwiBot for the first time. It shifted when it went from, here's this thing, I really want you to just try it out, to it's never been tested before in Detroit. Do you want to do this together for the first time? What we learn together is going to actually determine whether or not this stays in this market, whether it excels in this market, and ultimately how this company chooses to scale their product and their vision, globally. So I think it just goes back to what you were saying so well, James, which is you're really seeing different people and community members, government leaders, kind of local business owners as not secondary to the cause, but really as being primary and there to collaborate and to see the benefit from all of this work taking shape in their backyard and to really be part of it. So awesome. Well, thank you both so much, really, for your support all along the way and for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague, Kate Shubik, who's going to kick off our first startup panel.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for getting us started. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Shubik. I'm a program director at New Lab and have been working closely to support the Accessible Streets Studio. I'm going to kick us off with our first panel, which will feature presentations from Tara Pham from Numina and Brian Kell from Solar Tonic, and then we'll segue into a discussion. So, as we previewed in the introduction, fostering welcome and safe streets is one of the topics the studio sought to address. And we learned in our research and engagement that residents want to see solutions that help make streets and sidewalks more hospitable for all modes of transportation and not just people in cars and vehicles. So through this lens, we really explore different products and technologies that have the potential to improve the experience of pedestrians, public transportation riders, and people using micromobility services throughout Detroit. So diving into this topic area in just a bit more depth, pedestrian safety at intersections is a major concern that was voiced by Detroiters. Residents shared a variety of concerns, from cars traveling in bike lanes to lack of infrastructure or clear markings or signage, to drivers that can sometimes be aggressive in terms of ignoring road rules or the pedestrian right of way. And this is where Numina's data-driven approach to understanding that type of intersection and street level activity can play a really critical role in starting to unpack and address some of these concerns. So with that, I would like to invite Tara Pham to join us and share more about Numina and its work in Detroit.
Hello. I'm so sorry. I've lost internet. These are the times we live in. I missed the intro. I'm going to share about Numina. I'm assuming that was what the intro said. But thank you, Kate, for having us in this program. So to share what Numina is, we've actually been working with New Lab for quite a while. We launched the very first product we had actually with New Lab in the Circular City program at the end of 2018. And our company measures all forms of street level activity. Basically, we use computer vision or AI applied to imagery on streets to understand from the vantage point of fixed infrastructure like light poles and buildings, what is in streets, how things move in streets, and then from that basic anonymous activity data, derive analytics that urban planners and communities can use, usually to design more walkable and bikeable streets that are kind of safer for everyone and aren't planned solely around car counts. So we today work in more than 25 cities around the world, and we were really excited to join the Accessible Streets Studio because we've never worked in Detroit. And we can actually go to the next slide. On the right side of the screen, you see a rendering of our data. So this green hovering box, and now that second little green box, those represent pedestrians as they are detected by our sensor, and all of those orange, yellow, magenta boxes flying by, those are cars. This is essentially how our sensor perceives objects in the street. And as you can see here, we're picking up a situation where pedestrians might feel in danger crossing. There's really not appropriate pedestrian infrastructure here. And so in a lot of our projects, we are looking to find these kinds of, you could say, data stories, these incidents in streets, and quantify them in order to show planners sort of where there may be opportunities to design safer and more pleasant streets experiences. What is unique about our product is that we provide this intelligence without additional surveillance. So I like to show this video rendering because it is truly how our sensor perceives what's going on in the street. You can see we've detected a pedestrian represented by this green box. It's our sensor saying, okay, there was a pedestrian shaped blob. I can kind of recognize that shape in the street. But we don't ever see the actual imagery behind this, and we don't have images of the people that crossed there, and we at no point attempt to identify them as individuals. And so this is how our whole product is designed. It's designed with privacy by design principles, meaning we are never going to collect personally identifiable information. We actually minimize the data we collect at every sort of layer of our product. So at the sensor layer, we are processing incoming camera feeds, processing the imagery on board the device, discarding the imagery itself, and only sharing the anonymous kind of path data of the detected objects. And then, server side and sort of through our entire technology stack, we're further synthesizing that data into analytics that typically we present in aggregate formats that in volume really can't be re-identified to individuals after the fact. And we were excited to test this in Detroit for a number of reasons that I think we'll get into. But certainly one is that we heard a lot from the community that, especially where we're deploying on Michigan Avenue, that there is not a great sense of security for non-drivers using the street. The street is very wide. It's kind of a highway through the city. And so what we're hoping to do, and we can go to the next slide, is measure what's going on the street and translate that into analytics and reports that make it easy for all kinds of stakeholders in the community to understand what's been happening there, and hopefully make recommendations for how to redesign the street or even program the street differently. It's not just, hey, the sidewalk needs to look different or the built environment needs to look different, but also are there things as a community that we can be doing at intersections, like putting out different signage or having events that kind of make people aware this is an area to slow down, that this is a destination rather than just a place to pass through fast. And so over the period of our pilot, we'll be installing on the factory building, which is at Michigan Avenue and Rosa Parks in Detroit, measuring what's going on at that intersection. And there's a lot there. There's kind of, the factory, which has a lot of entrepreneurs and business activity there. There's immediately next to that a bike share station. There are a number of bike lanes, crosswalks. It is a very dynamic intersection, and we will be trying to convert some of the community feedback we heard about sense of safety at this intersection, really trying to instantiate that with real world examples and data as detected by our sensors, and translate that kind of up and out to the community and to the city to understand how we might improve the situation. We can go to the next slide. So we are right now in logistics to get our sensors installed. The way our product is designed, it's meant to be installed by third-party electricians. They will install this on the factory building. We will then do a period of data collection over some months. And through that time, we can actually iterate on kind of what interfaces and analytics and reports are proving useful to local neighboring businesses, to residents who actually live in Corktown, to the planners, of course, at Detroit DOT and other agencies within City of Detroit, and other kind of neighboring groups. There are conservation groups and business improvement districts that are always interested in this data. And as we kind of iterate while collecting the data on how to actually share it out, we'll be refining what kind of our ultimate deliverables will be to share that out with the community and with planners to actually hopefully make some potential interventions really actionable. And I think we can go to the next slide.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Tara, for that overview. We'll see you again in a few minutes for our discussion. But for now, I'd like to segue into another opportunity that the studio aims to address, which is helping to empower smart and safe communities. So as people navigate their own communities and travel between neighborhoods, we heard a few key things, and one of those is they want to feel a sense of safety. And part of fostering that atmosphere is really creating a welcoming street and sidewalk environment, and equipping community spaces and public spaces such as parks and bus stops or public passageways with the right type of infrastructure to really feel inviting. And so one approach to this opportunity is Solartonic's product, which offers a suite of integrated solutions that provide lighting, wireless communication networks, signage, wayfinding, all while taking into account personal privacy. And so with that, I'd like to ask Brian Kell from Solartonic to now join us and share more about his company and how his team is working in Detroit.
Great. Hello, everyone. I want to, can you all hear me? Good. I want to start just by thanking Kate and Shana from New Lab and Roshni from Michigan Fort Central and James and Sam from Projects and People for the support and for bringing us into the studio. It's been really a great experience for us. So as Kate, as you introduced us, we have a sort of a full suite of solutions. We empower smart communities, and we do that by focusing on bridging the digital divide and enhancing safety, communications, and mobility in communities. And we think of communities in a couple different ways. One of course is neighborhoods and municipalities, which is relevant for this project. We also think of it as sort of communities of aligned interests, or what we call micro communities, like college campuses and airports and the like. So we approach the notion of community sort of in a broad way. And we empower communities through our solar powered and wireless networks. And as Kate mentioned, we can offer anything from lighting to CCTV, IoT sensors, signage, and Wi-Fi network systems. And then we also offer then the 24/7 cloud-based remote monitoring and controls of those systems, which allows a full suite of data analytics and insights that we can provide to the end user customers. Next slide, please. So again, it's a resilient cloud connected infrastructure, which we call Solar Hub. And that drives the full ecosystem of those other products, the lighting, the IoT, the signage, et cetera. They can be located basically anywhere that they're needed, and that's without disrupting existing infrastructure, and typically at a life cycle savings cost of up to 60% compared with your hardwired, electrical powered or cable fiber infrastructure. So we developed this because more and more communities of all stripes are looking for they're looking for ways to get to develop and install community infrastructure that is not disruptive, one. Two, that is clean tech and is net zero energy and CO2. But rather than going off and having to find 6 or 7 different vendors that provide all of these different solutions, the technology is available now to enable us to integrate these in a full package. We have our systems deployed throughout Michigan, throughout Texas, Arizona. We've got some in California, and we have also some overseas in Dubai and Singapore. And we're looking to expand here in Michigan and Detroit, and our participation in the New Lab Michigan Forward Central project is really key to that. And we are based here in Michigan. So one of the reasons that we wanted to participate in this is we're in Southeast Michigan. We've done a few projects here, but we want to be able to contribute to to the renaissance of Detroit, because it's the biggest metropolitan area in this state, and we want to be able to support the communities in our backyard. We'll talk more about that later. On this diagram real quick, if you could see the detail. I'm not sure if those of you at home on your computer can see it, but basically we've got systems that involve lighting, CCTV, electronic ink, digital displays, as well as some other features, and the public Wi-Fi. And so each of the 2 use cases that I'm going to talk about in a minute, each will deploy these. And why don't we go to the next slide, which would be a good segue. So we've got 2 use cases that we are getting ready to deploy as part of our New Lab project. So one is going to be in the DeQuinder Cut Greenway, which is one section of the extensive greenway system that has been developed and is still being developed throughout Metro Detroit. And the other is a bus stop application, which we're looking at the intersection of Bagley and Trumbull. And so these poles will, enhance, in each case, they're going to enhance the safety and security aspects, which is really critical. Kate mentioned at the beginning, we find that so many communities want to lead with that because, safety and security is sort of, first and foremost in their minds. But then you've got with the digital, the issues with internet and broadband, and just having access to reliable Wi-Fi. We're going to have that as well. In this case, it's a public Wi-Fi system. And then wayfinding. So whether that's bus timetables on an electronic screen, because we know that residents want to see improvements to the bus system and how that's communicated, so they know where the buses are at any given moment. As well as just information about, maybe there's public safety notices or events that need to be advertised. We'll be working with the city agencies on that. And then with the greenways, we'll be working with the Riverfront Conservancy to really flesh all that out. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, our next step is to get these deployed in the first quarter of 2022. We are in the process now of working with all our local partners to develop, agreements, get the agreements in place about roles and responsibilities for the various stakeholders. So that should all be in place over the next few weeks, and then we will move into final engineering and assembly and get them out, as I said, at the beginning of 2022. And then we'll deploy those for, I believe, 2 months, and we will be both receiving feedback and obtaining feedback from street level users, people who interact with the polls, and then we'll also be tracking remotely through the cloud, and we'll be communicating what we learn to the stakeholders at the end of the project. I think I'm probably at the end of my 6 minutes, so I am going to stop there.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. And with that, I would love to invite Tara to join us back on screen again so we can get into a bit of a discussion with the group. And I would actually like to start with you, Tara. Thank you for the great overview of what Numina does and how the sensor system works. It would be really great if you could characterize for the audience who are the different stakeholders that have utilized Numina's data and insights in cities where you're deployed. And maybe you can share an example of how data that Numina collects then kind of translates into clear benefits for the community or municipalities where you've worked, just to give us a little bit of a real world example.
Sure. So we're often selling to departments of transportation, so agencies that really focus on urban planning, specifically to enhance experiences for drivers, for pedestrians, for bicyclists, transit riders. We do work with a number of other types of customers outside of government, business improvement districts, university campuses, private real estate developers, but really anyone who is planning, designing, and operating kind of public realms, so the space between buildings, streets, sidewalks, plazas, and so on. What they are interested in is understanding how people use space. That's actually just something that I think as humans, maybe especially humans who live in cities, we intuit, but we don't actually have kind of well accepted data sets around that are truly quantitative. And in fact, a lot of planning outside of car counts is really dependent on anecdata. Like, what do the people who show up at community meetings say is happening? And that's a biased data set, biased by who can show up to those meetings. So often we are quantifying how people use a specific space to turn that into hopefully some sort of intervention. To give an example, we did a project in Jacksonville, Florida, which at the time had the highest pedestrian fatality rate of any major American city. And what that really looked like inside the city was they just had no idea how many people even walked in a lot of their neighborhoods. And we were able to show in corridors where there were high incidences of crashes and injury, that actually a lot of people were crossing mid-block. And so what that meant is, like, there just weren't enough crosswalks, and we could actually show them by overlaying all the paths that pedestrians were taking in the street, exactly where to add crosswalks to actually match how people behave, rather than trying to get people to kind of conform to the concrete and the built environment. And in a lot of cases, there are crosswalks nearby. It's just that for some reason, there were kind of amenities that encourage people to cross mid-block, and that was causing a lot of conflicts with drivers. In a specific project we did with New Lab as a partner in downtown Brooklyn, we were able to show that when scaffolding is erected in streets, pedestrians are 53% more likely to just walk out into the street off of the sidewalk. And that has huge implications in a city like New York that has 300 miles of active scaffolding any given day. It kind of alerts our attention, or focuses our attention to the fact that actually pedestrian safety might be a concern of Department of Buildings and not just kind of be the burden of the DOT to deal with. So one thing I'll just say is we always partner with local on the ground groups. We are not an urban planning firm. We are a technology company that inherently, by building a product, we are trying to build something that is scalable, replicable, and that in some ways means inherently not tailored to specific communities. And what that means, sorry, I think I've lost connection for a moment. But what that means is we're working with local partners to actually translate what our technology does into on the ground valuable findings and designs and interventions for the street.
Great, thank you, Tara. And good example of how data has the power to overcome some of those biases and assumptions that might go into planning. So thanks for that example. I want to turn to Brian and maybe in the same vein, asking about kind of a real world example to help bring Solar Tonic to life. Could you give us an overview of one of your previous deployments? I know that there's a project in nearby Highland Park, and maybe share how that has informed your approach to bringing smart poles to Detroit, or if there's any kind of learnings there that you've been able to apply to your entry into the Detroit market. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm sure happy to talk about either Highland Park or even we just successfully did an installation down in Dallas that was also very community focused. We could talk about that one as well. And so, I mean, I think what many of our deployments have in common are, I guess, similar to what Tara mentioned, is we've done a lot of projects where the need and the expression of what's needed comes from the community, right? From the residents, from the citizens. They know what they want. And often, the way to develop the project, sometimes we can do that through the municipality, or through the elected officials, but sometimes that isn't feasible. And so, like in Highland Park, the community there basically decided they're going to crowdfund, 2 or 3 blocks worth of off-grid solar street lights that have public Wi-Fi, because they knew they needed it, they knew they wanted it, and we're doing that as a model to then try and scale up in Highland Park. But how that informs Detroit is ultimately for us as a company to really scale, and also to bring this to the greatest number of people as quickly as possible, to be able to serve as many people as possible. We ultimately do need to partner with the cities, with the municipalities. We need community partnerships always. And we've never done a project that doesn't involve community organizations as partners in one way or another. But at the end of the day, we need to have more direct participation from the elected officials, from the departments, from the agencies that are really overseeing the infrastructure, and are at the end of the day are going to be responsible for working with us on service and maintenance. So this is a project, and this is an opportunity for us to really work through that one in our own backyard and be able to contribute something of value we know that Detroiters want, but also to be able to then scale that up and take that knowledge and the learning to other communities, other cities around the country.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. Could definitely keep going with lots of questions. But I know we've got a number of other folks that we're going to bring on to chat. So thank you, Brian and Tara, so much for that overview. Now going to segue over and invite Shayna from our team to join again and bring us into our second panel discussion.
Thank you, Kate. All right, so next we're going to delve into a set of pilots that have focused on enabling access to information and essential resources. And I'm going to be joined by Holly McKenna from SUFA, Mateo Mayor from KiwiBot, and then Renee Espinoza from Lazarillo. So I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. But first, just to set the stage a bit. So within this big picture goal of enabling access to information and resources, we're really thinking about how to make information about both public transit options and new mobility services easy to find and really intuitive for everyone. And this is so important for helping people navigate the city on a daily basis. And also, really, we've seen, playing off of what Tara was just saying in the last discussion, how this type of work can produce critical data that helps to inform future planning. And we also think about how mobility freedom can serve as a gateway for connecting people with opportunity. So making it easier for people to really get where they need to go, but also using mobility innovations to make essentials more readily available in neighborhoods. So looking at ways to reduce the burden for people to need to travel long distances and actually bringing resources into neighborhoods. So we were particularly excited to partner with SUFA because we heard from residents really that reliable transit information could be elusive and difficult to locate, especially if you don't have a smartphone with a data plan, or maybe English isn't your first language. So Holly, I'm excited to pass it to you and to hear more about SUFA and the work that your team has been doing in Detroit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shana and Kate, for having SUFA here. We're super excited to be a part of this awesome initiative. So what I've actually noticed, and it's been really cool to hear the other speakers, there's a lot of amazing synergies between SUFA and some of the other technology startups that we've heard before, where SUFA itself, we're a female-founded startup out of the MIT Innovation Lab. And years ago, the focus was for SUFA to be focused on solar-powered, Wi-Fi enabled hotspot benches. That was kind of the model for a while, but as you alluded to a little bit, Shana, access to information is super important. So that's what we've gravitated toward and thus born the SUFA sign. Similar to what we heard earlier about the e-ink powered screen, we have the same thing. We're a solar powered digital sign kiosk, essentially, which can integrate into a lot of amazing integrations that the city gives us connection to, whether it's transit information or content. But really the whole point of a SUFA sign here is to allow equitable information to all constituents in a community, as well as wayfinding information. So this just shows you what our SUFA sign looks like in the wild. But one of the really cool things is in the last about 6 to 8 months, we've expanded from 3 to 16 states in the US. So we've partnered with many different municipalities and local organizations, commercial real estate, to get these signs in the ground. And one of the most amazing things about these signs, they're solar powered, and getting these signs in the ground is super quick and easy. So no excavation required, no digging up the ground. We can pop these signs in 30 minutes with 4 bolts in the ground, and they're completely powered by the sun. So what you see here in this image is what we fondly refer to as our neighborhood news feed. And it's really our source of truth for all the information that constituents need. Again, whether that be real-time transit information, public service announcements for health and safety. A lot of our partnering cities have used this during the times of COVID to get access to health information and things of the like. And then lastly, our kind of back-end software with SUFA is there's access to post local advertisements on this sign as well. So software behind it, what we call SUFA Talk, allows anybody with access to the account to be able to post on the sign. So we will allow for local advertisements on these specific signs as we roll them out. Lastly, one thing that I'll mention is our signs are smart. So it says in the headline here, our mission is to help make cities smart, social, and sustainable. The smart piece is our sensors that are inside the signs. So we're able to track pedestrian data, which again is similar to what we heard earlier from a presentation where we're giving you some more street level analytics to help figure out the best way to set up your infrastructure. An example of a city that leveraged this in the past, they had to spread out different entryways along their sidewalks and their streets during the times of COVID. And our pedestrian data enabled them to do that. So again, really helping them during this time. And so if we go next here, what does this mean for Corktown? So specifically what we're doing here is we really want to help provide real-time information to Detroit's local business and their community groups. Again, transportation resources, local updates and information. The hardware itself, to go into that a little bit more, it is solar powered, e-ink screen. It's not going to be like an advertising screen that you would see in New York City. We're not looking to be Times Square. It is a high contrast, basically the same thing as a Kindle screen, that high contrast black and white, and it's extremely durable. So again, 4 bolts in the ground, but it is hurricane resistant, able to be powered and on during really hot temperatures, really cold temperatures. So really durable, an amazing resource to have in the ground there. And then for Corktown specifically, where we're going to have these, once we roll them out, they'll be around the perimeter of the factory building on Michigan Avenue. And again, they'll be connected in to display real-time information about micromobility, transit, and any other community updates. So next steps here, if we move to the next slide. Awesome. Yeah, so we're working through a couple of the final stages here where the signs will go live very shortly in the locations that I just mentioned. And the next step after they're installed and in the process now is just figuring out exactly what we'll be presenting on those screens. And then lastly, just leveraging our analytics to provide Corktown with all of the information they need, from pedestrian data to all of the local updates that we're getting from the local community and anything else that they want us to post on their own. So I'll leave it to the next presenter, and thank you again for having us.
Great, thanks, Holly. Okay, so next up we have Mateo from KiwiBot. And I'll say that this company really resonated with the studio because it offered an opportunity to rethink how people access basic necessities in their neighborhood and how that could actually create opportunities for both residents and also for local businesses. So I'll leave it to Mateo to tell us more.
Thank you, Shanna, for the introduction, and thank you for everyone to be here, especially New Lab and Central Michigan and people, project and people for all their help. So yeah, robot powered delivery built for cities and local businesses. So in KiwiBot, we're offering people an affordable and reliable way to get local goods delivered, such as grocery or takeout from local restaurants using a friendly robot. KiwiBot has launched its service in Kirktown. We're trying to empower local businesses to deliver to their customer in their neighborhood for free of charge, offering delivery service that don't cut into the business of the local businesses. In addition to delivering goods, the robots, it's collecting critical data on infrastructure, street and sidewalk conditions to foster accessibility and to make cities safer. And all of this project is called the Scouting. Next slide. Can be furnished with a new and convenient option of the while reducing CO2 footprint. Also, collecting valuable data, as I already told you, which we'll share with the city to improve local infrastructure, accessibility, and mobility. With all of this, we're going to make cities more smarter and safer. In the following steps, next slide, Detroit first cyber robots
Oops. All right. Looks like Matteo may be having some connectivity issues, so we can cover the rest of KiwiBot's presentation. Maybe he'll pop back on for the discussion, but I'll add I've been working really closely with the KiwiBot team, and they're one of the companies that has launched their pilot. So they've been active for about 2 months now in the Corktown neighborhood. So having mapped that area, collected that critical data, and now offering delivery service free of charge with a local restaurant partner, and starting to explore other use cases as well. There's the robots on the sidewalks have attracted a lot of positive attention from kids and local restaurant owners, as well as physicians in the area who have actually approached the team about possibly partnering up to deliver medications to elderly residents who are homebound in that neighborhood. Matteo, did we get you back? No? All right. So let's move on over to Renee from Lazarillo. So accessibility can mean different things for different people. And we heard this from residents and also from policymakers in Detroit, who are really thinking about how to make sure everyone can safely and comfortably navigate a neighborhood, ride on public transit, and engage with local businesses and different organizations. So Lazarillo brings a set of tools to the table that really supports blind people and people who are visually impaired. So Renee, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. So hello, everybody. My name is René Espinosa. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Lazarillo. First of all, I want to say thank you to New Lab, Michigan Central, and Projects and People, because they have been support us during this whole process. So our application helps people with low vision or blindness to navigate cities. So it provides information in an audible format about the user surroundings, let's say the street intersection, the bus stop, but also businesses in their trip. So a restaurant and hospital, everything that's around them, so that they can have more orientation, they can reduce their anxiety, and they can have trip safer and also more efficient. So in this project, we on one side collaborate with different organizations that are working to enhance the independence of people with low vision and blindness across Michigan. So we engage with institutions like Leader Dogs that they provide guide dogs for the community across the United States. I learned that they provide training, the Detroit Disability Power, and now also with the Disability Network organization. So this has helped us engage with the local community, understand the user needs, but then also we map the whole Corktown area so that we are able to improve the information of businesses, because currently Lazarillo can work globally, but it will use different open source data sources that sometimes that is not enough. Those data sources doesn't have, for example, the entrance or the menu or things like that. So for a business, in order to comply with different regulations, such as the American with Disability Act, their digital information and access to their services needs to be accessible. For a small business, they need to navigate that, and actually it's not so easy to understand what are the steps to follow in order to comply, and not only comply, but how they can reach new customers. So we went one by one business where we created like a profile that we now want through a year, work with them, with the small business owners to help them improve their accessibility and then reach a community so they can become clients too and have an excellent experience. So we already mapped over 100 businesses across Corktown. We have done some user testing that we want to keep on doing. We also not only map the whole Corktown area, but we integrated with the APIs of SmartBus, DDOT, and Q-Line, so that users can have access to when is the next train going to come, or the next bus is going to come, so that they can have access to an audible interface that helps them understand that and reduce anxiety. So during this next year, the next steps are to continue engaging with the businesses, also start doing more workshops with the help of this organization that we have been able to interact. The app is totally free, so anyone can download it and try it out so they can understand how it works. So we also are going to push that more so we can provide workshops so people that are losing their sight, they understand how to use the not only the smartphone, but also the app. So they can use it as another tool for their portfolio. And we want to create multiple engagement. This process has helped us a lot to engage also with the city, and hopefully we can continue to expand this project to other neighborhoods, but then also to other business opportunities such as universities and hospitals that they provide key services, and we want to help them also expand their accessibility. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Renee. I really appreciate that. And I want to welcome back to the screen. Renee, stay with us, and also invite back Holly and Mateo. Hopefully you're able to join as well. Renee, I actually want to start with a question for you. You've spent so much time in Detroit this year working to deploy the Lazarillo app in Corktown. Can you talk to us about some of the relationships that you've built and what maybe new or interesting things you learned from that experience of just being on the ground and engaging with different members of the community?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, as you mentioned, I've been staying a long time because one of the key factors for us is to engage, for example, with organizations that are already working towards improving accessibility, not only in Detroit, but also across Michigan. So we have been able to go all the way up north to the Leader Dogs organization, visit them, have a meeting in person, actually visit their campus where they host, and they provide for free guide dogs to people, not only in Michigan, but across the United States. And they have talked about some difficulties for their beneficiaries that have when they reach and they come, for example, they reach the airport of Detroit, right? So that has been key. Also with iLearn, Disability, Detroit Disability Power, and the Now Disability Network that we actually met a few days ago, we see a lot of opportunities to collaborate and engage. I also been to a goalball training that for people that don't know. So in Michigan, there's actually a player that went to the Olympics a few months ago. So wow. I was also able to engage in those, meetings where it's actually getting the feedback from the people that matters for us. And then on the business side, business have been really impacted. And so, for some people, I knew that you have helped us a lot to now trying to engage, even though they have been coming, they have it open, closed. So now we see that the whole year is going to help them out also in this process to understand their timing, considering the pandemic, but has been great to be here. I love the city. I love the food. So I have to say it's been wonderful to stay here. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Renee. Mateo, I want to bring you back into the discussion. Similar to Lazarillo, building partnerships with local stakeholders has been a really important part of KiwiBot showing up in Detroit. And I'd say you guys benefit from the fact that, you show up with a robot that has, screens that look like eyes and emotions and is designed to look friendly and cute. People want to start a conversation. I've seen it happen. It's like a magnet. Kids go right to it. They're so excited to learn about it. Can you talk a little bit more about how you approached relationship building in Detroit and just showing up for the first time?
Yeah, so I remember the first day we were in Detroit with the robot, and we went to a restaurant called Cat Bunnies, and we really liked the food, and then New Lab helped us to connect with them. So basically, we look for restaurants that are innovative, that believe in us, that they can see that this is the future. So that's how we created the relationship with them. We have doing some beta orders with them, and we have received great feedback. But also, we on that day we went knocking doors, telling the restaurants what is this robot about, and we received a lot of interesting opinions and feedback. And also we can see that with Cat Bunnies, it's great because it's very close to the factory and to the Michigan Central. So it's very in a like great point in Kirktown. So yeah, so basically that was the way we create relationship and in Detroit.
Nice. Can you talk a little bit about the concept? I think you guys call it the first dates with the robot and just meeting people in the community, even beyond the businesses.
Yeah, so our way like to interact with people and tell them like what we're doing here and why is there a robot in Kirktown. We call it like dating with the robot dates. So yeah, so basically like people that stop us when we're like in our operations or when we go to events for engagement, we will like to take pictures and like also like receive feedback about what they think, since like we know that it's like people need to adapt to see robots like rolling on the street. So that's like very important. And yeah, so they ask us questions like where we're operating, how does it work. So it's very nice that like marketing campaign we do with the people.
Great, thank you. Holly, I want to bring you back into the discussion here. Can you talk more about SUFA's vision for how the signs that are going to go live in Corktown will benefit the neighborhood? And maybe you could take another city or one of your recent deployments as an example of how this comes to life for your company.
Yeah, happy to. So, the signs are only as powerful as the information on them, right? So our mission is to have the most relevant hyperlocal information on these signs. So to make this a reality, we've worked closely with the DDOT to integrate the real-time data feeds with the signs. And it's going to be displaying real-time arrival information for 7 bus routes that service the Corktown neighborhood. And, of course, not everybody is using buses and public transit for their transportation. So we're also integrating into micro-mobility information as well, in particular MOGO docks. And other dockless objects like scooters to ensure we have all other micro-mobility options there on the screen. And then apart from the mobility information, what I mentioned before, the neighborhood news feed, we want to make sure that it has that local community aspect and all the updates that are going on throughout the city. So we've worked closely with New Lab, of course, Michigan Central, to initiate conversations in the community and have those local updates on there. And we've already received some content submissions from local businesses. One example is Bobcat Bonnie's, a New Lab, of course, Michigan Central, and then we're continuing to work with the neighborhood associations and nonprofits to get their content on the screens. And in partnership with Michigan Central, we're offering free advertising to any local businesses in the studio impact zone. So we want to make sure that there's access to that advertising and that local content that can be published directly on the sign for free.
Great.
Oh, and you also asked for an example. So I did mention the town of Brookline, Massachusetts earlier. Talk a little bit about that. I spoke specifically about their how we helped them through the pandemic, but they have, we work with them with their Chamber of Commerce, Brookline Commission for the Arts, their library in particular posts about contactless pickup of library books during COVID. The Brookline Commission for the Arts created a gallery in the streets highlighting the work of local creators on the sign. So a lot of really exciting updates from the community. And then on the transit side, we work with Miami-Dade County to integrate in their transit organization and populate those real-time arrivals and updates for the constituents there.
Great. Lots of things to get excited about that are to come for Detroit. Renee, back to you for a moment. You spoke about this a little bit. You held different user interviews and tests to collect feedback on the Lazarillo app and the services that you're offering. Obviously, customer feedback is paramount to informing, where you take your product next and the features that you want, the improvements that you want to make. Are there any common themes that came up in those conversations that are now kind of pointing you towards the direction that you want to take Lazarillo's product in the future?
Yeah, actually, one of the things that came up a lot during the interviews of users is the amount of uncertainty they have when they need to visit a location. So there's a lot of uncertainty whether or not they can access a place, if that place has a ramp to access to their services. So they, for example, people with reduced mobility, while they can be able to ride, but in order for them to get out of their car, is actually troublesome a little bit. So sometimes they're not sure is that place actually they're able to access it or not. And so actually having that key information for them could help and facilitate the process on deciding whether or not they go to that place. And also on the side of what things the businesses can do. We have get also feedback from wheelchair users that use electric wheelchairs, right? That it would be nice for them to have like a place to charge their wheelchair while they're having a beer or having lunch. So those things it's actually kind of really difficult to know if you've never engaged with the local community. And so our approach there is how we can communicate those additional services, and that can be added to as a layer of information that currently doesn't exist, right? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Renee. That's great. Mateo, I want to talk to you more about how the data that KiwiBot collects, the company's vision for using that to empower cities and different city stakeholders to help improve the state of infrastructure, the state of sidewalks and things. You know, how are you testing that out in Detroit? And feel free to use Detroit or one of the other cities where you're piloting this as well as an example.
So yeah, so the scouting project is it's a street data collection project to gather sidewalk, cross ramp, and gutter improvement opportunities toward like taking better public investment decision. So KiwiBot setups robot to gather points around the city to improve this pedestrian and handicap experience in it. Currently, we're in 4 pilots, one in Pittsburgh, San Jose, Miami, and Detroit. So basically, the product that we will give, it's going to be divided by the introduction of what is the scouting and why are we doing this with a glossary for everyone to understand if they receive the link. Also, then it's going to be the road state with a description and analysis of each scouted category with the neighborhood completely mapped. Then it's going to be the road improvement per neighborhood, per scouted categories. Here, the city starts checking all the things to improve in terms of damages, sidewalks, damaged curbs. And also you could see the deliveries information of pickup point, drop off point, the times, we can divide the times of putting the food, going, the routes, all very descriptive. And also the incidents of per category of the robot while we are in operation, so we can check where we have some problems in connectivity or where the robot is turning off. And finally the recommendations that it's how you can improve very detailed, improve the streets and to make a better city and a smarter city.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it's a very intriguing hypothesis to start to test, to imagine you've got these systems deployed, whether they're SUFA signs or robots on the street, and just by virtue of doing what they're there primarily to do, share information or deliver food or prescription medication or something, they're collecting a really valuable data set that the city and different municipalities don't necessarily have the resources to collect on its own. So it's definitely a space that we're going to be watching more and more in the future. Holly, one last question for you. I love the way that SUFA positions itself as this neighborhood news feed, and this idea that it's very much community first. It should feel like it's of a community. You spoke a little bit about this in terms of how you engage local businesses and local transit agencies, but anything else about how you feel the company is uniquely suited for communities? I'm thinking about even the look and the feel of the signs is a great signifier of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say, first, the hardware is the the most unique identifier here. We're the only 100% solar powered and sustainable solution communication platform here for cities. So of course that's good for the planet. Local communities are, really invested in this type of technology right now. But I mentioned this earlier, it's also super easy to install. So there's no trenching, there's no emissions, anything like that. 4 bolts in the concrete and you're really off to the races. And you mentioned, the aesthetics of the sign as well. That's certainly a value prop of ours. It has that e-ink powered screen. We talk about it as a neighborhood news feed. It's like a newspaper, but what's really cool about it is how customizable it is too. So we want to show the different applets like transit and things like that. But we also want to make sure that it's customizable to the needs of that community and posting different content in certain areas. And again, displaying the applets that make sense. So social media, again, that transit, eventually weather applet. So the customization of the screen itself is super important. And then the last piece, which we didn't touch on as much, it's less on the technology side, but the wrap of the unit itself. So we will wrap the full unit in vinyl, and we make sure to work directly with the community to ensure that the branding is, matching with the community. And oftentimes we'll work with the art association with those communities and do contests and things of the like to have the true community branding directly on that sign.
Great. All right, Renee, I'm going to round out with one last question for you. You've done all this beta testing. The Lazarillo app is now live in the App Store. I hope some people with us today take the time to download it and to explore it. What are your plans to expand your presence in Detroit or even more broadly in the region of Michigan moving forward?
Thank you for that question. So what we're doing right now is that as we already engage with the key institutions that work on disability, now we're defining some expansion project with them, also expand the use of the app, and then how we can replicate this project to other neighborhoods as well as to other main key institutions. Hopefully it can work at the stadium, right? So in a way, there are many key locations that we're trying to reach decision makers to hopefully expand the usage. So the app can also work in multiple key places such as hospitals, stadiums, and also areas where people engage like downtown and things like that, right? So that is our next step. We have now the possibility to collaborate with different organizations. So in a way, it's with them that we're going to plan all the expansion, yeah.
That's great. It's great to think about, how does it start in Corktown and then start to emulate out from there and really create a continuous experience for someone to navigate different neighborhoods and really the full spectrum of their daily experience. Great. Well, thank you so much, Holly, Mateo, and Renee. Thanks for your participation in the studio and your partnership here today. And for our final panel, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Drayton Taylor. So Drayton, take it away.
Thanks, Shayna. Next, we'll be discussing how the studio looked at enabling an easier first and last mile connection. And we'll be hearing from Peter Deppy on the Commute team and Ken Hedjuk from Sway Mobility. So the first and last mile connection describes the beginning or end of an individual trip. In low density neighborhoods, public transportation can be limited and prohibitively hard to reach. So it's common for people to walk to transit if it's close enough. However, on the other end or on either end of a public transit trip, the origin or destination may be difficult or impossible to access by a short walk. And this gap from public transit is termed the first and last mile connection. So through the studio, we wanted to look into ways to bridge this transportation gap. And one company we worked with through the studio to address this challenge is Commute, which operates in the micromobility space. Micromobility solutions like e-bikes and e-scooters can provide necessary first and last mile connectivity. However, these offerings, as many people might know, can often be unreliable due to their inconsistent locations and how much charge is actually left on the devices. So with Commute, we explored fostering more reliable micromobility options and improving upon the current ecosystem with their universal charging hub. So I'd like to invite and introduce Peter Deppy, the founder and CEO of Commute, to speak more to his company.
Awesome. Thanks, Drayton. And thanks everyone for having us for this studio program. The experience was amazing, as the other startups have explained from their own point of view. But a little bit about Commute. We were started in 2018 when both myself and my co-founder realized that there was a huge gap in infrastructure for electric vehicles, and more specifically, micro electric vehicles, aka micromobility. And at that time, we knew we could design something with our backgrounds, both in the automotive sector and engineering. We could design something that was sort of the Tesla supercharging network for anything smaller than a car, with both the obviously the traditional forms of micromobility, such as scooters and bikes, but also a little less traditional, but still as equally important, with wheelchairs, delivery robots, cargo bikes, and more. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned in our saying, it goes, we are the Tesla supercharging network, quote unquote, for anything smaller than a car. We do this from Vehicle City here in Flint, Michigan, as it's known. And we're going to hopefully turn that into Micromobility City here shortly. But here during this program, unfortunately, with the Accessible Street Studio name, we weren't unfortunately able to use like wheelchairs and other forms, but we were able to partner with a world-class operator such as Boas Bikes with sit-down scooters that had an emphasis on being more accessible forms of micromobility transportation. We're still in the works to get them up and running. And in the meantime, we have launched, a few scooters alongside of the hubs that we have deployed in the Detroit community. So really excited to not only keep the shared fleet side parked, charged, locked, and secured, to have more uptime to, hopefully be available to more people. But next year we will open up the platform, since it is a charging network. It's not proprietary to any one shared fleet, or it does not exclude personally owned vehicles as well. So it's really truly a broader charging network for anything smaller than a car. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, the image is a little bit small, but you can see here's one of our charging hubs at the IBEW, so the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, local union 58, I believe, off the top of my head. So it was a great partnering with them. Really excited to get them up and running, and we'll actually be hopefully using them or working with them for installations of charging hubs throughout the community. And we also learned that there was a chapter in Flint where we're based out of, and chapters really all over the US. So really great connection to have there. The Boas Bike partnership, like I've mentioned, really excited to kick that off. Like I mentioned, us personally here at Commute, we have a focus on accessibility, hence why we support multiple form factors and are form factor agnostic with our charging network. But the Boas Bike partnership was great for us because that was a great place to start with an accessible, focused form of scooter, sit-down scooter, that residents and community members could use to get around, as I know the Boas Bikes are fairly popular in Detroit. And then to utilize our charging hub, you simply use, in some case, or in the case with the Boas Bike, you would just use their Boas Bike app. And through the integration, you scan the QR code on their scooter, just like you normally would with any other micromobility rideshare. And it unlocks the vehicle from the hub automatically, and you can go on your way, go on your rental. And if you choose to bring a Boas Bike back to one of our charging hubs, there's different types of incentives that we will be testing to show and figure out what is the best way to get people to essentially rebalance the fleet for the Boas Bike operations, so that way they can save money and then reduce congestion out on the road to rebalance the fleet, and then make just the street space a little bit safer for everyone. In the case of as we're getting them up and running, we have put out a few of our own scooters, and we will have our own mobile app here out for use with those scooters here pretty soon as well. So really excited to at least kick off something for the residents, and then move in with Boas Bikes here pretty shortly as well. So yeah, looking ahead, we're always in the works to install more and more hubs in the Detroit area. So if you know any private property, parking garage, restaurant, community center, bus stop, mobility hub that is looking for different solutions for parking and charging, different micromobility options, we'd love to get in contact with you. Our goal was to support and deploy up to 10 charging hubs during this project. So we still have a few extra that we're looking to deploy, and we're still going to continue to push to deploy, even though winter's coming. But when the the sun comes back up in the springtime, really looking forward to really kicking everything up again, as well as opening it up to the other ride shares in the area as well. So that way, again, our focus is on being inclusive for all rideshare providers. So that way, more people can leverage the great benefits of micromobility as a sustainable form of transportation, as opposed to having infrastructure stay or be a blocker in the sense of really adopting micromobility as a way of life. So that's something that we're really excited for as we continue to push to put more hubs out in the community. User feedback is collected. We'll have team members, not all the time, but some of the time over by charging hubs to see how people react and use take advantage of our charging network, whether it's with Boaz Bike or in the future other ride shares or their personally owned vehicle. And then we'll also take feedback directly on our website and within the various mobile apps that will be utilizing our infrastructure as well. Additional locations, like I mentioned, we're still looking, and I want to make sure I hit this home, that we're still looking for locations, and we're still super excited and super hungry to get more hubs out there. So if you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact us after this, and looking forward to getting you up and running with some micromobility parking and charging. So thank you.
Thanks, Peter. So another company that we worked with through the studio is Sway Mobility, which operates in the EV car share space. And as we considered how to help communities overcome transportation challenges, we had to acknowledge that there are times when public transit and micromobility aren't going to be enough to enable mobility freedom. And in those instances, owning a vehicle might not be an option for that resident, or they might only need a vehicle once in a while. So car share becomes an equitable and more affordable means to get around in that scenario. This is what we've been working with Sway Mobility to better understand how to enable. And I'd like to invite Ken Hedjuk, the COO of Sway Mobility, to speak more to his company and the pilot that we ran.
Hello, thanks, Drayton. Hi, everyone. Is my video showing up? Sorry.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. All right, so thanks. Thanks, Drayton. Thanks to Michigan Central team and New Lab. This has been great. So Sway Mobility is, we are a car share as a service company. Now, so, as the first mile, last mile challenge is very real. And, if you think about most of the United States, it was designed around the car. And as great as public transit and micromobility are, and they're getting better all the time, there's just some real challenges to getting things done around a city. And so, as much as we would like to be able to rely on those every day, you still need a car from time to time. Sometimes things are out of reach. Sometimes something could be served by public transit, but you may have a scheduling conflict where you need to be somewhere, and just the ability to get there on time might mean that you have to leave hours early just to meet that schedule. So we decided that we wanted to explore this idea of creating a car share company, but different than the car share operations that had been in play to date. So we created this idea of car share as a service, where we essentially package up all the things necessary for a car share operation, the vehicles, the insurance, the technology to enable operation, operational support, customer support, and then work with communities and organizations to help them address their specific needs. You can go to the next slide. Just to kind of talk about that neighborhood or community solution. So there's, we're all familiar, or most of us are familiar with car share. We've seen it around. It's been in Detroit before. it's no longer there in the same way that it was. But for the most part, car share has really been addressed through these private companies like Zipcar, who put cars where they think they're going to be profitable. And typically those are very high density neighborhoods. And you see them in New York, and you see them in San Francisco and Chicago and other bigger cities. But where you don't find them, or where you don't find them are in neighborhoods that could really actually use a service like this to help residents get around, help residents address mobility needs. So we decided we're going to create this model where we can bring a car to a community and work with the community to address the specific needs that their residents are trying to tackle. So that's what we're doing in Corktown. You can go to the next slide. So with car share is a little bit different than a lot of other solutions, because, well, specifically in EV car share, it's even more challenging. But with car share, you have to first and foremost secure a place to park a car, and then with electric vehicles, that place also has to be able to you have to be able to pull charging infrastructure there, and that's not always the easiest thing to do. So when you're looking for a location, some of the things that you're really focused on is walkability, convenience, safety, not just for the users, but for the car. We've had cars broken into in the past. We've worked on ways to try to mitigate those problems, but you're really looking for places where people can access the car, people can see the car, but they also feel safe being there. But realistically, the biggest concern is trying to find a place that is convenient for people, because we know that if it takes them too long to get there or they can't find it, they're just not going to use it. So we're also partnering with IBEW to put one of our cars there. We're really excited about that. And I believe we're also having them help us with the install. The other issue with car share, different than micromobility, is you have this couple 1,000-pound vehicle moving about the city, and you have people driving those. So we have particular issues around insurance. So one of the things that we have to also focus on is making sure that we are communicating with the community and educating them around their eligibility, making sure they get validated as drivers so they meet our insurance requirements, so we could then provide them the insurance while they are driving the car. You can go to the next slide. So looking ahead, so we are really gearing up to get the program going. We're working on the charging at the moment, hoping that's up and running in no time, and then we will be putting the vehicle in play. As far as getting the word out, this is one of those areas where community outreach is huge. Utilization of car share is always a little bit challenging at first, because people need to know that it's there. They need to understand that it's for them. It's not very often that a car just shows up in your neighborhood and you're allowed to use it. So it's really we're really working on the ground with the community to educate them around, when can you use it? How do you use it? It's an electric vehicle that might be new to you. What's different? And there's, so we're going to be focused on that in the very near future as well. And then, like everyone else, we're looking to expand, and really hoping that there's some more locations around Detroit that we can bring car share to. So let us know if you are part of a neighborhood group or a community that's looking for car share as an option. We'd love to chat. And with that, turn it back over to you, Drayton.
Perfect. Thanks, Ken. So at this time, would like to kick off the panel with Peter from Commute and Ken from the Sway Mobility team, and to be able to ask them some questions about their companies and their experiences. Peter, I guess my first question is for you. What compelled your team to go out and create a micro mobility hub as opposed to creating a scooter and a bike? And how does it really differ from the other hubs on the market?
Yeah, great question. So, fun fact about us, we actually were an electric scooter operator for some time in Flint, Michigan, where we're based out of, where we launched, a small fleet of electric scooters alongside of our charging hubs. During that time, we decided to make the pivot towards focusing and doubling down on the charging side because we saw that there were many operators out there that lacked a quality and versatile piece of infrastructure. And if we look at electric cars, for example, really the only thing, or there's the biggest thing holding back electrified mobility in general, regardless if it's micromobility or full-size electric cars, is always the infrastructure supporting it. And in most cases, the charging infrastructure. So we felt, with the trends that were going towards everything electrified, we figured, if we designed a piece of infrastructure that was able to be not only charging, but a security device as well, it would allow us to be, different than just being an operator, but then bringing our unique twist on it of being a full-on charging network, as opposed to, and I think everyone's familiar with those bike share stations that are unique and only can park, the bike station bikes. We're much different than that because we're form factors agnostic, we're shared and owned agnostic. We provide a platform for personally owned vehicles to access and see what charging hubs are near them, and then be able to go and park and charge there. And then we work with those shared fleet operators so that our hubs are shown within their rider apps as well. So that way everyone knows and has access to a charging network to make them feel safer, the vehicles are more reliable, they're secured, which in turn makes the vehicles safer over the lifespan of the vehicle. So there's a lot of good benefits to having dedicated charging infrastructure. And that's what really sets us apart, is having that versatility and agnostic approach to being a universal charging network for anything smaller than a car.
Absolutely. And we saw this partnership with Boaz Bikes form through the studio and with this pilot. What started that relationship, and how are you looking to maybe replicate that with other micromobility providers?
Yeah, so we've known of Boaz Bikes for a little bit before the studio, and then knowing that they were already in Detroit was a huge benefit and a way for us to reach out on a sort of mutual location, if you will. So it made a lot of sense for them because they are looking for ways to lower operation costs, especially in the winter. And then, throughout the whole year as well. But they were really interested in seeing, how can we make their service somewhat autonomous in a way where they don't have to send out as many people to service a fleet, to service a community and provide mobility. So for us, that's something that we're really excited about. And we're also replicating, this type of partnership with other mobility service providers or ride shares across the country in mainly North America, US and Canada. So we'll start seeing more and more cities adopt our infrastructure, as well as the different operators and even vehicle manufacturers adopt certain standards that we're helping push forward, because micromobility as a newer industry tends to lack a lot of standards.
Absolutely. I've heard it described as the Wild West a few times.
Oh, yeah.
Ken, a similar question for you. What made you pursue car share and specifically as a service, as opposed to looking at something purely like a zip car? You chose to pursue car share as a service. What was that motivation there?
Yeah, so when we got started, we were really looking to address the high cost of transportation, mostly in low and moderate income neighborhoods. And the more we looked at what solutions were available, and how they would actually address the specific needs, it became apparent that car share was something that we could do that would provide a ton of value. But if you just take that model of zip car, it's very clear very quick. You would never put a car in these neighborhoods because that model inherently isn't going to be profitable right out the gate. And because there's such a high capital cost to car share between the vehicles and the insurance, we really needed to come up with a model that made sense, because you've got, and so you have to partner, essentially you have to partner with organizations to cover some of those upfront costs, and then design a program that meets the needs of those organizations or those neighborhoods. So it was really about utility and actually achieving, the mission we set out to tackle. That made us go for this car share as a service. Had we decided, we just want to make as much money as we possibly could doing car share, we would be looking at different cities, different locations. And you very quickly go to large scale operations. You immediately start looking at places where you can drop 20 to 100 cars, it's actually quite a bit easier to do these larger scale operations because of the economies of scale. But we decided, all right, if we're going to make this work, if we're actually going to help people who need more mobility options, we have to figure out how to scale all the way down to a single car. And in order to do that, we just had to take a completely different approach.
Absolutely. And I know that your past operations, you've looked at things like car share as an amenity. From this pilot, what have you been looking to learn or glean from the deployment in this area? And how's that going to inform how you might evaluate something as being an ideal location for your service?
Yeah, so it's always a balance. The health of a car share operation is really measured by its utilization. Again, the high capital costs mean you need high utilization just to break even. And so in order to ramp up utilization, in order to get utilization to a sustainable point, you really have to understand how that car is being used. So how many trips are being taken on a regular basis? When are they being taken? How far are the trips? How far are people going on a regular basis? We find in some locations that some people are going 3 or 4 miles at a time and then returning, where in other places we find people are taking cars for hours at a time, running a whole bunch of errands and then bringing them back. But in order to make it the most useful vehicle for a neighborhood, you really have to understand how is that specific neighborhood using the car. Like I said, hours a day, times of day, because you also have to balance that out with making sure that the car is charged so that people can actually get to where they're trying to go. So we need to learn all of this. And every time we go to a new deployment or a new neighborhood, it's learning these all over again because everything's unique to that particular neighborhood.
Absolutely. I guess my last main question to you, Ken, and Peter, would also like your thoughts afterwards as well. We saw your team start to build this relationship and actually pitch your pilots together almost as a package to various stakeholders around Detroit. How did this relationship come about and possibly influence your conversations with potential pilot hosts?
Yeah, so Michael from my team was more involved in the partnership. He's not able to make the call today, but we did get a chance to get to know Peter and his team. We love the concept. We're big fans of this idea of a mobility hub, right? So it's not just where we can put a car, but where multiple modes of transportation can unite. It becomes the highest. That makes it the utility to the users that much higher, right? If you can get out of one mode and shift to another in a general location, it's so much better. So we're real excited about the Commute concept, and it's actually something we would love to figure out how to bring to Cleveland, where we're based. But yeah, I mean, just thinking about how those different modes come together into a single location, it's really, it's kind of the perfect solution.
Thanks, Ken. And building off of what you said, when we think of an accessibility studio like this, when you think of the word accessibility, I think the word that follows it is always choice. So giving people the choice of the mode of mobility that's best for their abilities and their style of trip, if you will, is really the best package solution for a community. If you gave them, just micromobility or just a car share, you would solve some of the problems for some of the people. But if you're able to give, like Ken said, a mobility hub, you solve a lot of issues for essentially, the vast majority of the community members in the area. So having an area where you have access to a car for your slightly, like I would say, medium to longer style trips, and then bikes and scooters available to you for those first last mile, really quick trips. It again gives people the choice to choose what is right for them and their abilities, and maybe the weather, maybe they're getting groceries, so they need more room, or maybe it's just them and they don't want to take their car and reduce a single occupancy vehicle trip. So there's a lot to be said for giving people the power of choice when it comes to mobility.
Absolutely, and that's something that we were really excited to start seeing with the studio, was this kind of serendipitous relationship between your teams, and not initially thinking about it in the beginning, but seeing that how that complementary aspect of your offerings come together to possibly build that larger and more valuable mobility hub. We were really excited to see that. But thank you both for your time and for answering the questions here today. I think that I'm going to be handing it back to Kate Shubik now to close out the event today.
Great. Thank you so much, Drayton. Just want to say a big thank you to all of our panelists today, Michigan Central, Project and People, our 7 cohort companies. It was wonderful to bring you all together for a virtual afternoon and to share some of the findings and updates from your experience in the Accessible Streets Studio. Thanks to everybody who joined us. There will be a recording of this event that will be distributed to everyone who is registered, so feel free to utilize that and share it with anyone who might be interested. And then we've dropped a link here up on the screen where we've been updating information on each of the pilots. As you heard today, some are launched already, some are about to launch, some will launch soon. So we'll continue to keep that site updated with any relevant information so you can keep tabs on how these projects are progressing in Detroit. So just a big thank you again, and look forward to having you stay in touch with us. Thanks, everyone.